The air in the Montgomery townhouse on Grosvenor Square was perpetually thick with the scent of fading roses and Madame Colette's ambition. Lady Genevieve Montgomery, its sole, exquisite ornament, often felt as if she were a particularly rare hothouse bloom, admired for her beauty but pruned, watered, and positioned solely for her mother's grand design. Today, the design was nearing its apotheosis, the betrothal to Viscount Eastwick. "Genevieve, darling, hold your chin a fraction higher," Madame Colette commanded, her voice, once the toast of opera houses across Europe, now merely a resonant hum in their drawing-room. One must always present an unassailable profile, especially today. Genevieve adjusted, her gaze drifting to the rain-streaked window. The London spring was a dreary affair, mirroring the grey landscape of her soul. She was 20, accomplished in all the requisite feminine arts, embroidery, polite conversation, and a passable rendition of a country dance on the pianoforte, yet felt utterly unequipped for the grand performance of her own life. Viscount Eastwick was due to arrive any moment, and with him the finality of her gilded cage. Lord Eastwick was everything the ton admired, impeccably dressed, shrewd in business, and possessed of a lineage as ancient as the oaks in his ancestral park. He was also, to Genevieve's private despair, as warm and inviting as a freshly polished marble statue. Their conversations were polite, skirmishes of logic and practicality, devoid of the slightest spark of shared humor or genuine interest. He spoke of estates, political alliances, and the proper management of a household, while Genevieve yearned for discussions of poetry, art, or even the wild, untamed beauty of a storm. A carriage rattled to a halt outside, announcing the Viscount's punctilious arrival. Madame Colette straightened her already ramrod-straight posture, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. "Remember, Genevieve," she whispered, her voice a stage. "Hiss, this is for us, for our future, for the Montgomery name to regain its luster." The drawing-room door opened, and the butler announced Viscount Eastwick and Mr. Sebastian Thorne. Genevieve's breath hitched. She had heard whispers, of course, of Eastwick's younger, illegitimate brother, raised in France, a shadowy figure rarely seen in London society. He was an inconvenient truth, acknowledged but largely ignored by the ton. Yet, as he stepped into the room, a stark contrast to his elder sibling, Genevieve felt an unexpected jolt. Viscount Eastwick was precisely as she remembered, tall, lean, with sharp, intelligent eyes that assessed rather than admired. Beside him, Sebastian Thorne was slightly less imposing in stature, but his presence was a quiet force. Dark hair, a touch longer than was fashionable, framed a face that was strikingly handsome, yet bore a subtle melancholy. His eyes, a deep, unsettling grey, met hers for a fleeting moment, and Genevieve felt a strange sense of recognition, as if she had known him in a dream. He offered a polite, almost imperceptible bow, then retreated to the periphery of the room, a ghost in his own brother's shadow. The conversation that followed was a predictable dance. Eastwick spoke to Madame Colette of financial settlements and social obligations, while offering Genevieve a few carefully chosen compliments on her gown and her agreeable disposition. Genevieve responded with practiced grace, her smile fixed, her thoughts a jumble. All the while, she was acutely aware of Sebastian, standing silently by the window, his gaze seemingly fixed on the street below, yet she felt the subtle pull of his presence. Later that evening, after Eastwick had departed, and Madame Colette was immersed in celebratory correspondence, Genevieve found herself restless. The silence of the house, usually a comfort, now felt oppressive. She wandered through the dimly lit corridors, her thoughts heavy, until a faint sound reached her ears. A melody. It was a piano, but unlike any she had ever heard played in the drawing-rooms of London. this was not a polite waltz or a cheerful jig. It was a mournful, passionate piece, imbued with a raw emotion that resonated deep within her. It was a song of longing, of unspoken sorrow, yet threaded with a fragile hope. The notes flowed, rich and complex, from a secluded wing of the house, a part usually reserved for storage and forgotten things. Drawn by an irresistible curiosity, Genevieve followed the sound, her slippers silent on the thick carpets. The melody grew stronger, pulling her towards a closed door. She hesitated, then, unable to resist, pushed it open a fraction. Inside, bathed in the soft glow of a single candelabra, sat Sebastian Thorne. His back was to her, his dark head bowed over the keys, his fingers dancing across them with an effortless grace that spoke of profound talent and countless hours of devotion. He was utterly absorbed, lost in the music, and for a moment, Genevieve saw him not as the illegitimate brother, the outcast, but as a soul laid bare by his art. The melody swelled, a crescendo of emotion, and then, abruptly, it stopped. Sebastian's hands stilled on the keys. He slowly turned, sensing her presence. His grey eyes, which moments before had been clouded with musical passion, were now guarded, distant. The spark of recognition from earlier flickered, then was extinguished, replaced by a polite, almost wary expression. "Lady Genevieve," he said, his voice low, with a subtle, intriguing French lilt. "Forgive me, I did not realize anyone was near." Genevieve felt a flush creep up her neck. "No, forgive me, Mr. Thorne. I heard the music. It was beautiful." He merely inclined his head, his face unreadable. The moment was gone, replaced by the invisible wall of their societal positions. He was the illegitimate brother, she the Viscount's intended. The music, their brief, shared secret, was now just a memory. Lady Thistlewick's Gazette of Grand Gossip, Special Edition. The Ton is abuzz with the most delightful news. Our very own Madame Colette, the incomparable nightingale of the opera, has orchestrated a veritable triumph. Her exquisite daughter, Lady Genevieve Montgomery, is soon to be officially betrothed to the eminently eligible Viscount Eastwick, a union of impeccable lineage and undeniable social acumen. This match promises to be the jewel of the season. Madame Colette's masterful social maneuvering has truly proven that a prima donna's stage extends far beyond the footlights. One does, however, hear whispers of the Viscount's enigmatic younger brother, Mr. Sebastian Thorne, a shadowy figure lately returned from France. One wonders if this quiet presence will add a dash of unexpected spice to the otherwise perfectly arranged tableau. Such intriguing questions for the discerning observer. The following morning dawned with a crisp, almost mocking brightness. The previous evening's encounter with Sebastian Thorne felt like a dream, a fleeting, impossible moment of connection in a world determined to keep them apart. Genevieve dressed for breakfast, the silk of her gown feeling like a silken straitjacket. Viscount Eastwick arrived promptly at 10 o'clock, accompanied by his solicitor, Mr. Finch. The proposal was, as Genevieve had anticipated, a formal affair conducted with the precision of a legal contract. There were no declarations of affection, no grand gestures, only the recitation of settlements, dowries, and the advantageous merger of two prominent families. "Lady Genevieve," Eastwick stated, his voice even, "I believe this union will be mutually beneficial. Your grace and accomplishments will undoubtedly enhance my household, and my position will secure yours. Do you concur?" Genevieve looked at him, at the cold, calculating intelligence in his eyes, and felt a profound weariness. She thought of the music from last night, the raw emotion that had stirred something deep within her. This was not that. This was duty, obligation, and the silencing of her own heart. I concur, Viscount, she replied, her voice steady, though a tremor ran through her hand as she accepted the elaborate ring box he presented. The diamond within glittered, cold and brilliant, a symbol of her new reality. Madame Colette beamed, her face alight with a triumphant glow. My dear children, a perfect match. The ton will be utterly captivated. Later, alone with her mother, the weight of the betrothal settled upon Genevieve like a shroud. She walked to the pianoforte in the drawing room, her fingers hovering over the keys. She had once loved to play, but her mother's relentless demands for perfection, for performances that would showcase Genevieve's accomplishments rather than her passion, had long since extinguished that joy. "Mama," Genevieve began hesitantly, I should like to resume my lessons, properly. Perhaps I could truly improve." Madame Colette, who was admiring the new diamond on Genevieve's finger, paused. "Improve, darling? For what purpose? You play perfectly adequately for a lady of your station. Music, my dear, is a delightful accessory, a charming accomplishment to display. It is not a pursuit in itself. Your focus now must be on your trousseau, your social engagements, and ensuring your future as Viscountess Eastwick is beyond reproach." "But mamma, I wish to learn more deeply," Genevieve pressed, a rare surge of defiance stirring within her. "I wish to understand the music, not merely to play the notes," Madame Colette tutted, waving a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. Such serious pursuits are for professionals, for those who must earn their living. You are to be a viscountess, not a common musician. Besides, your hands are meant for embroidery and the delicate art of pouring tea, not for the strenuous exercise of a concert pianist. Let us not be absurd." The dismissal was absolute, crushing. Genevieve retreated, the familiar ache of disappointment settling in her chest. Her mother's world was one of appearances, of grand performances, but never of genuine expression. That evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of bruised violet, Genevieve found a small, discreet note tucked beneath her chamber door. Her name, written in an elegant, unfamiliar hand. Her heart hammered as she unfolded it. "Lady Genevieve, I observed your desire for true musical understanding. If you are serious and can keep a confidence, I would be willing to offer instruction. My schedule is usually occupied with pupils from the local gentry, but I find myself with a rare opening. Consider it a small contribution to the harmony of our families. Meet me in the old music room, by the west wing, after the household retires. Discretion is paramount. Signed St. Sebastian Thorne." Genevieve's heart leaped. A small contribution to the harmony of their families? A veiled excuse, perhaps, but the offer was real. He had seen her, truly seen her, and offered a lifeline. The risk was immense, the scandal, if discovered, unimaginable, but the promise of music, of genuine connection, was too tempting to resist. Later, cloaked in a dark shawl, Genevieve slipped silently through the sleeping house. The old music room was cold and dusty, but a single candelabra, already lit, cast dancing shadows on the walls. Sebastian was there, standing by the pianoforte, his silhouette stark against the dim light. "You came," he said, his voice a soft murmur. "I did," Genevieve replied, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," he advised, gesturing to the piano stool. "Let the music speak. What would you like to learn?" Genevieve hesitated, then, emboldened by his quiet presence, confessed, "I have always yearned to play with true feeling, not merely to execute the notes, but to breathe life into them." Sebastian nodded, a faint, understanding smile touching his lips. "Then we shall begin there. Forget the conventions, Lady Genevieve. Forget the audience. Forget everything but the sound." He sat beside her, his proximity a warm, comforting presence. His fingers, long and elegant, gently guided hers over the keys. He spoke of phrasing, of dynamics, of the story hidden within each melody. He taught her to listen, not just with her ears, but with her soul. Their first lesson stretched into the small hours, illuminated only by the flickering candlelight. The dust motes danced in the golden glow, like tiny, silent witnesses to their clandestine world. For the first time in years, Genevieve felt truly alive, truly herself. The music was an escape, a secret language spoken between two souls, a defiant melody against the rigid harmony of her gilded cage. With every note, the unspoken bond between them deepened, a forbidden sonata beginning to play. The clandestine piano lessons became the sun around which Genevieve's days revolved. Each evening, as the household settled into its somnolent rhythm, she would slip away, a phantom in her own home, drawn by the promise of the old music room. There, under the discreet glow of candlelight, Sebastian Thorne shed the mantle of the Viscount's illegitimate brother and became simply Sebastian, a passionate musician, a patient teacher, and a kindred spirit. He spoke of music not as a series of notes to be mastered, but as a living, breathing entity. "Feel the melody, Genevieve," he would instruct, his voice a low, soothing cadence. "Let it flow from your heart, through your fingers, and into the air. It is a conversation, a confession, a prayer." Genevieve, under his tutelage, blossomed. Her fingers, once stiff with convention, now danced across the keys with newfound agility and, more importantly, emotion. Sebastian taught her pieces that were wilder, more complex than anything Madame Colette would have approved of, melodies that spoke of longing and rebellion. As their hands brushed over the keys, a silent current passed between them, a language deeper than words. She learned of his solitary childhood in France, his mother's quiet strength, and the solace he found in music when society deemed him an outcast. His pain, so carefully hidden from the world, resonated with her own stifled existence. "You understand," she whispered one evening, after a particularly melancholic piece had ended, the last notes hanging in the air like a sigh. "You truly understand what it is to be unseen." Sebastian's grey eyes met hers, a flicker of something raw and vulnerable in their depths. "More than you know, Lady Genevieve, but in music we are seen, we are heard." Their connection deepened with every shared chord, every stolen glance. It was a dangerous game, a fragile secret, but it was the only true thing in Genevieve's life. Viscount Eastwick, however, was not one to miss the subtle shifts in his intended's demeanor. He was a man of keen observation, his mind a finely tuned instrument for detecting discord. He noticed the new lightness in Genevieve's step, the almost imperceptible glow in her eyes that had not been there before. He observed her quiet interactions with Sebastian during the infrequent family dinners, a shared glance over a teacup, a lingering moment when their paths crossed in the hall. One afternoon, he found Genevieve in the drawing room, idly tracing a melody on the pianoforte. "You seem to have developed a renewed interest in the instrument, Lady Genevieve," he remarked, his voice smooth, devoid of inflection, yet carrying an undercurrent of scrutiny. Genevieve's heart gave a nervous flutter. "Indeed, Viscount, I find it a pleasant distraction. I thought, perhaps, to hone my skills, to better entertain your guests once we are wed." She offered him a practiced, demure smile, hoping it masked the tremor in her hands. Eastwick merely nodded, his gaze unwavering. "A commendable ambition, though I confess I had not previously noted such a fervent dedication. One hopes your newfound enthusiasm does not distract from more pressing duties." His eyes flickered towards the West Wing, a silent, chilling accusation. Genevieve felt a cold dread creep up her spine. Had he guessed? Or was it merely his innate suspicion, his need to control every facet of his ordered world? She quickly changed the subject, steering the conversation to the upcoming social calendar, a safe, neutral topic. The Ton, however, had a new, far more compelling subject for their insatiable appetites. Lady Thistlewick, ever the harbinger of scandal and sensation, had outdone herself. Her latest scandal sheet hit the streets with a dramatic flourish, its headline screaming, "Lady Thistlewick's Scandal Sheet, Shocking Return." Prepare yourselves, dear readers, for a revelation that promises to send shivers down the spines of even the most jaded among us. Whispers from the continent have solidified into a thunderous roar. The notorious Lady Helena Blackwood has returned from her self-imposed exile in France. Yes, the very same Lady Helena whose name was once synonymous with, well, let us merely say, unconventional behavior, and a certain unfortunate incident involving a prominent gentleman and a rather public misunderstanding. One hears her return is not for quiet contemplation, but for a rather more spirited purpose. Some suggest a vendetta, a score to settle with a certain prominent family. Could it be that she seeks to reclaim what was once hers? The season, already promising, has just become infinitely more intriguing. The news of Lady Helena Blackwood's return swept through London like wildfire. Genevieve had heard the vague, hushed stories of Helena's past, a broken engagement to Viscount Eastwick years ago, followed by a swift departure from England under a cloud of unspecified disgrace. Now she was back, and the air crackled with anticipation. Helena made her dramatic reappearance at the Duchess of Cranbrook's annual ball, an event usually marked by its staid elegance. As the doors to the ballroom swung open, all conversation ceased. Lady Helena Blackwood stood poised on the threshold, a vision in blue gown, her dark hair artfully coiffed, her eyes, sharp and intelligent, sweeping the room. She possessed a striking beauty, but it was a beauty edged with a dangerous allure, a hint of defiance that set her apart from the demure debutantes. Her gaze, with unnerving precision, found Viscount Eastwick across the crowded room. A slow, knowing smile played on her lips. She moved with an almost predatory grace, making a direct path towards him, ignoring the gasps and whispers that followed in her wake. "Viscount Eastwick," she purred, her voice low and husky, a stark contrast to the polite trills of the other ladies. "It has been an age. I trust you have not forgotten me." Eastwick, for once, seemed momentarily taken aback. His usual composure faltered, a flicker of something akin to surprise, perhaps even unease, crossing his features. "Lady Helena," he replied, recovering quickly, though his voice was a shade cooler than usual. "Your return is unexpected, is it?" Helena's smile widened, a challenge in her eyes. "Some things, Viscount, are simply destined to resurface, like old debts or old affections." She laid a gloved hand lightly on his arm, her touch lingering just a moment too long. Genevieve, standing a short distance away with Madame Colette, watched the exchange with a growing sense of unease. Helena's confidence, her blatant disregard for convention, was both shocking and, in a strange way, compelling. She saw the subtle shift in Eastwick's posture, the way his attention, usually so meticulously divided, was now entirely consumed by Helena. The air around them seemed to crackle with an unspoken history, a dangerous tension that promised to unravel the carefully constructed facade of the season. Helena had returned, not as a penitent, but as a force to be reckoned with, and Genevieve felt a chilling premonition that her perfectly arranged future was about to be profoundly disturbed. Lady Helena Blackwood wasted no time in re-establishing her presence in the Ton. She was a whirlwind of calculated charm and veiled provocations, effortlessly drawing attention wherever she went. Her primary target, it seemed, was Viscount Eastwick. She would appear at every soirée, every promenade, always managing to engage him in conversation, her laughter echoing a little too loudly, her hand lingering a little too long. She spoke of their shared past in veiled terms, hinting at confidences and intimacies that made the other ladies of the ton prickle with curiosity and envy. "My dear Viscount," Helena purred one afternoon at a garden party, her voice carrying just enough for Genevieve to overhear. "Do you recall that delightful little cottage near your estate, the one with the rose garden? We spent so many charming hours there, did we not?" Eastwick's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Lady Helena, I confess my memory for such trivialities is not as keen as yours." Helena merely smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. "Perhaps some memories are simply too precious to be trivial, Viscount, or too inconvenient." Genevieve observed these exchanges with a growing sense of discomfort. Eastwick, usually so impervious, seemed genuinely unsettled by Helena's presence. Yet he did not entirely rebuff her, drawn perhaps by a perverse fascination or a sense of unfinished business. What truly puzzled Genevieve, however, was Helena's unusual interest in Sebastian. She would often seek him out, engaging him in conversation, seemingly intrigued by his quiet, artistic nature. Genevieve saw Helena watching Sebastian during social gatherings, a speculative gleam in her eyes that was far from innocent. "Mr. Thorne," Helena had said to Sebastian at a crowded assembly, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I hear you have spent considerable time in France. Such a fascinating country. One wonders what hidden talents one might acquire there, away from the stifling conventions of London." Her gaze flickered meaningfully towards the pianoforte in the corner. Sebastian had merely offered a polite, non-committal reply, but Genevieve felt a prickle of unease. Helena's interest felt less like genuine curiosity, and more like a probing, a search for weakness or leverage. One afternoon, during a rare visit to Eastwick's sprawling country estate, Genevieve found herself wandering through the dusty, rarely used library. On a cluttered side table, amid stacks of old ledgers and forgotten books, she spotted a sheet of music. It was a partial composition, handwritten, and as her eyes scanned the notes, a jolt went through her. The melody, the intricate phrasing, the unique harmonic progression, it was unmistakably Sebastian's style. It was a fragment of a piece he had played for her during one of their lessons, a haunting, unfinished melody that had deeply moved her. She picked it up, her fingers tracing the faded ink. It was beautiful, imbued with the same melancholic passion that defined his playing. Why was it here, in Eastwick's library? A few days later, during a formal call at the Blackwood townhouse, Genevieve was ushered into Helena's private sitting room. Helena, ever the gracious hostess, was showing off some recently acquired French trinkets. As she gestured towards a small writing desk, Genevieve's gaze fell upon another sheet of music. It was also handwritten, also incomplete, and to her shock, it was the exact same composition she had seen in Eastwick's library. But this copy seemed older, more worn, as if it had been handled many times. "Oh, that," Helena said, noticing Genevieve's gaze. "A little something I picked up in France, a charming, albeit unfinished, piece. I confess, I've tried to complete it, but the genius of the original eludes me." She gave a dismissive shrug, but Genevieve noticed the subtle tightening of her lips, the quick, almost imperceptible glance she cast at the music. Later that evening, in the sanctuary of the old music room, Genevieve confronted Sebastian. "Sebastian," she began, her voice low, with urgency, "I saw a piece of music today, at Lady Helena's. It was yours, the same incomplete melody I found in Eastwick's library. Sebastian's face, usually so composed, paled. He walked to the piano, his fingers hovering over the keys. That piece, it is not truly mine, Genevieve. It is my mother's. My mother was a gifted musician, Sebastian explained, his voice hushed, before she became an outcast. She composed many pieces, but that one was special. It was a gift from Eastwick's mother. They were friends, you see, before everything changed. A secret friendship bound by music. My mother always said it was the most precious thing she owned. He paused, a shadow passing over his face. I have been trying to complete it for years, as a tribute to her and to the woman who gave it to her. But then, how did Helena get a copy? Genevieve asked, a cold dread creeping into her stomach. Sebastian's jaw tightened. I do not know for certain, but I suspect when Eastwick's mother passed, and my own mother was dismissed, many of her belongings were left behind. Helena, I believe, found it then. She has always been acquisitive, and she held a particular resentment towards Eastwick's mother, for reasons I do not fully comprehend. A stolen composition, a piece of music that was not just notes on a page, but a symbol of a hidden friendship, a past betrayal, and Sebastian's very birthright. Helena's motives were becoming clearer, and far more sinister than mere social maneuvering. Lady Thistlewick's Chronicle of Courtship Calamities, a most curious case. The air is thick with whispers of a most peculiar nature. Our dazzling Lady Helena Blackwood, whose recent return has set tongues wagging, appears to be pursuing a rather unconventional interest. While her attentions to Viscount Eastwick are certainly noted, one hears tell of a curious fascination with the Viscount's quiet, French-bred brother, Mr. Sebastian Thorne. And here is where the plot thickens, dear readers. Rumors abound of a certain lost family heirloom, a treasured musical composition, said to have vanished years ago from a prominent household. Could it be that Lady Helena's return is not merely for romantic reclamation, but for something far more tangible? One recalls the adage, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned," especially when a valuable sentiment is involved. The season, it seems, is less a dance and more a dangerous game of chess. The revelation of the stolen composition, Sebastian's mother's legacy twisted by Helena's malice, cast a long shadow over Genevieve. Yet, paradoxically, it also solidified the unspoken affection between her and Sebastian. The danger they shared, the secret world of their music, became a sanctuary against the encroaching darkness of the Tun's expectations and Helena's machinations. Their lessons in the old music room grew more intimate, charged with a tender intensity. As their fingers moved in unison over the keys, their gazes would meet, holding for a beat too long, a silent acknowledgement of the burgeoning feelings between them. One evening, as Sebastian guided her through a particularly intricate passage, his hand brushed hers. It was a fleeting touch, yet it sent a jolt through Genevieve, a warmth spreading through her veins. Sebastian's breath hitched, and he quickly withdrew his hand, but not before his grey eyes, usually so guarded, conveyed a longing that mirrored her own. "Genevieve," he whispered, his voice hoarse, the single word a confession in itself. She merely looked at him, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The music had become their language, and in that moment, the melody spoke of forbidden desires, of a connection that defied all reason and societal decree. It was a silent confession, a shared truth that resonated deeper than any spoken vow. The fragile peace of their musical haven was shattered by Madame Colette's renewed demands. The Duchess of Cranbrook, impressed by Genevieve's newfound poise, which Madame Colette mistakenly attributed to the impending marriage, had extended an invitation for Genevieve to perform at her prestigious annual soirée. Madame Colette saw it as the perfect opportunity to solidify Genevieve's position and, more importantly, to stage her own triumphant return to the social spotlight. "Genevieve, darling, this is it," Madame Colette declared, her eyes gleaming with a familiar, almost frightening ambition. "The Duchess's soirée, the entire ton will be present. You must play something utterly captivating, something that will leave them breathless. It will silence any lingering whispers about anything, and it will remind them of the Montgomery name's undeniable brilliance." Genevieve felt a familiar knot of dread tighten in her stomach. "But Mama, I am not a performer. You know how I dislike such displays." "Nonsense," Madame Colette waved a dismissive hand. "You are my daughter. You have my blood in your veins. You will perform, and you will be magnificent. We shall choose a suitable showpiece, something grand and impressive." The pressure was immense. Genevieve knew she couldn't simply play a standard piece. Her heart yearned to express the truth she had found in music, the truth of her connection with Sebastian. But how, without exposing him, without ruining them both? Sebastian, sensing her distress, watched her with concern. "What is it, Genevieve?" he asked one evening, his voice gentle. She explained her predicament, the impossible demands of her mother, the suffocating expectations. Sebastian listened, his brow furrowed. He was torn. He longed to support her, to see her talent recognized, but the thought of his own name, tainted by illegitimacy and association with a common instrument, being publicly linked to the Viscount's intended, filled him with dread. It would not only jeopardize his precarious position within Eastwick's household, but could also irrevocably harm Genevieve's standing. "I cannot," he said, his voice strained. "It would be disastrous for both of us. My presence, my name, it would only invite further scandal." Genevieve looked at him, her mind racing. A daring, reckless plan began to form. "What if," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "what if I played one of your original compositions, not the one Helena has twisted, but something new, something only you and I know? I could present it as my own. It would be a confession, a shared secret, played for the entire ton, yet only we would understand its true meaning." Sebastian stared at her, his eyes wide with surprise. Then a slow, hesitant smile touched his lips. "A stolen melody indeed," he murmured, a hint of dark humor in his tone, but this time stolen for truth, not for malice. The idea was audacious, dangerous, and utterly thrilling. It would be their defiant act, a coded confession of love and artistic rebellion. It would give them a chance to share their truth, to let their music speak volumes, even as the world remained oblivious to its true composer. The risk was immense, the potential fallout catastrophic, but the thought of sharing their secret harmony with the world, even in disguise, was a temptation neither of them could resist. Helena Blackwood was a woman of keen intellect and even keener vindictiveness. Her return to London was not merely about reclaiming Eastwick's affections, but about dismantling the carefully constructed world that had once cast her out. She had observed Genevieve and Sebastian's subtle glances, their hushed conversations, and the almost palpable current that passed between them. The discovery of the shared musical composition had merely confirmed her suspicions. There was a secret, and secrets were Helena's favorite weapons. She began to actively spy on them, employing a network of discreet servants and her own sharp intuition. One evening, as Genevieve and Sebastian concluded a lesson, Helena, concealed in a shadowed alcove near the old music room, overheard a snippet of their conversation. "The Duchess's soirée," Genevieve's voice, soft but clear, drifted through the slightly ajar door. "It is the only way, Sebastian, to play your music, to make them hear." Sebastian's reply was too low to discern, but Helena's lips curved into a triumphant, chilling smile. "So, the little songbird has a secret composer," she thought, her mind already spinning a web of delicious scandal. "And the illegitimate brother, no less. This is far better than merely reclaiming a viscount." She realized the immense potential for public humiliation, a scandal that would not only ruin Genevieve, but also deeply wound Eastwick, whose pride she knew was his most vulnerable point. Eastwick, meanwhile, was growing increasingly suspicious. His cold, analytical mind registered the subtle changes in Genevieve, her quiet confidence, the way her eyes would sometimes drift towards Sebastian during family gatherings, a spark of something he couldn't quite decipher. He saw the way Sebastian, usually so withdrawn, seemed to gravitate towards Genevieve, however subtly. He was a man who valued order and control above all else, and this quiet, burgeoning connection between his intended and his illegitimate brother was a discordant note in his perfectly orchestrated life. One afternoon, he cornered Genevieve in the library, his gaze sharp and probing. "Lady Genevieve," he began, his voice deceptively calm, "I have noticed a certain preoccupation with the pianoforte and with my brother. Is there something you wish to share with me?" Genevieve's heart leaped into her throat. "Viscount, I assure you, my interest in music is merely a pastime. And Mr. Thorne has been kind enough to offer some pointers, as he is so skilled." She tried to maintain her composure, but she felt the cold steel of his suspicion. "Pointers?" Eastwick raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Or perhaps something more profound? I confess, I find his presence in this house, whilst you are my intended, to be inconvenient. I trust you understand the implications of any impropriety." His voice was low, laced with a warning that sent shivers down her spine. He was not merely suspicious, he was watchful, and his control was absolute. The pressure from both Eastwick and Madame Colette became unbearable. Madame Colette, oblivious to the true nature of Genevieve's musical passion, only saw the Duchess's soirée as her grand re-entry into society. She harped on Genevieve's posture, her smile, the precise timing of her entrance. Overwhelmed, suffocated by the expectations and the looming threat of discovery, Genevieve found herself yearning for escape. One afternoon, after a particularly draining session with Madame Colette, she impulsively sought out Sebastian. "I cannot bear it," she confessed, her voice trembling. "The pressure, the pretense, I feel as though I am suffocating." "Come," Sebastian said, his hand gently touching her arm. "There is somewhere you must go." He led her, not back to the old music room, but to a modest, charming house on the outskirts of London. It was smaller, less grand than the Montgomery townhouse, but it exuded a warmth and quiet comfort that instantly soothed Genevieve's frayed nerves. "Mamma," Sebastian announced, as a kind-faced woman with soft, intelligent eyes emerged from a sunlit parlor. "This is Lady Genevieve Montgomery." Madame Dubois, Sebastian's mother, was everything Madame Colette was not. Her smile was genuine, her embrace warm and unreserved. There was no artifice, no grandiosity, only a profound sense of peace and acceptance. "Welcome, ma petite," Madame Dubois said, her French accent more pronounced than Sebastian's, her eyes filled with a gentle understanding. "Sebastian has spoken of you. Come, sit. You look as though you carry the weight of the world." Over cups of fragrant herbal tea, Madame Dubois listened patiently as Genevieve, emboldened by her kindness, poured out her heart, the suffocating expectations, the coldness of her betrothal, the solace she found in Sebastian's music. Madame Dubois, offered no judgment, only quiet empathy, and a different perspective on womanhood, one based on inner strength, genuine connection, and the pursuit of one's own truth rather than societal approval. Genevieve felt a sense of belonging she had never known, a refuge from the gilded cage she inhabited. Meanwhile, Lady Thistlewick, ever vigilant, had caught wind of the brewing storm. Her latest publication, delivered with the morning papers, was already fueling the Tun's insatiable appetite for scandal. Lady Thistlewick's Society Secrets, a most intriguing triangle. My dearest readers, prepare for a confection of gossip so tantalizing, it threatens to overshadow even the most exquisite of season's bonnets. It seems a certain love triangle is brewing in the most unexpected of households, right under the very noses of the unsuspecting. While the imminent nuptials of Lady Genevieve Montgomery and the esteemed Viscount Eastwick are still the talk of the town, one hears whispers, faint as the rustle of a silk gown, of a rather intimate connection between the lovely Lady Genevieve and the Viscount's enigmatic younger brother, Mr. Sebastian Thorne. Could it be that the bonds of matrimony are not as strong as the bonds of melody? This observer, for one, finds the prospect utterly fascinating. The plot, dear readers, thickens with every passing day. The night of the Duchess of Cranbrook's annual soirée arrived, draped in a deceptive elegance. The grand ballroom glittered with chandeliers reflecting off polished floors and the jewels of the Tun. Madame Colette adjusted a stray curl, whispering last-minute instructions. "Remember your posture, darling, and smile, a radiant smile. This is your moment, Genevieve, our moment." Genevieve, dressed in an imperial green gown, felt a tremor of nerves, but beneath it, a defiant thrill. Tonight, she would play Sebastian's music. Their secret, their truth, would echo through these hallowed halls, even if only they understood its true meaning. Sebastian stood in the shadows by the entrance, his gaze meeting hers across the crowded room, a silent promise passing between them. The moment arrived. The Duchess, a woman of formidable presence, announced, "And now, we are delighted to present Lady Genevieve Montgomery, who has graciously consented to favor us with a musical selection." Genevieve walked to the pianoforte, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She sat, her fingers hovering over the keys, taking a deep breath. She closed her eyes for a fleeting second, picturing Sebastian's encouraging smile, Madame Dubois' kind face. Then she began. The opening notes were soft, ethereal, a delicate melody that seemed to float on the air. It was a piece of Sebastian's own composition, a melody born from his soul, imbued with the longing and hope they both shared. As she played, the music swelled, growing in complexity and passion. Her fingers danced over the keys with an effortless grace, each note infused with the raw emotion she had learned to express under Sebastian's tutelage. The room fell silent, captivated. Even Eastwick, standing beside Helena, seemed momentarily entranced, a flicker of something akin to genuine admiration in his usually cold eyes. Genevieve poured her heart into the performance, the music, a confession of her true self, a defiant song against the constraints of her life. The final chord hung in the air, a poignant, lingering echo, before fading into silence. For a moment, the room remained utterly still, then erupted into a wave of applause. A triumphant flush spread across Genevieve's cheeks. She had done it. She had played his music, and they had heard it. It was in that moment, amidst the polite clamor of admiration, that Helena made her move. With a seemingly innocent smile, she approached the pianoforte, where the official copies of the evening's musical selections lay. As Genevieve rose from the stool, bowing gracefully, Helena subtly, almost imperceptibly, slipped a sheet of music onto the piano, amidst the other scores. It was the incomplete, faded copy of Sebastian's mother's composition, the stolen melody she had acquired. Then, with a practiced ease, Helena turned to Lady Danbury, a formidable matriarch of the ton, known for her sharp tongue and even sharper ears. "Such a truly magnificent performance, Lady Genevieve," Helena began, her voice sweet, yet with an underlying current of malice. "One can almost hear the echoes of inspiration. Indeed, I believe I recognize this particular piece. Is it not a composition by the Viscount's younger brother, Mr. Sebastian Thorne? A rather unusual choice, given his origins." Lady Danbury's eyes, already keen, narrowed. She glanced at the music on the piano, then back at Genevieve, a flicker of suspicion in her gaze. "Mr. Thorne, you say? But I understood Lady Genevieve was presenting an original work." The whispers began, a ripple of unease spreading through the room. Madame Colette, who had been basking in the reflected glory of Genevieve's performance, stiffened, her triumphant smile faltering. Eastwick's face, which had held a rare expression of pride, hardened into a mask of cold fury. Sebastian, who had moved closer, his eyes fixed on Genevieve, saw Helena's subtle action, saw the sheet music she had placed. He understood instantly. "It is my composition," Genevieve stated, her voice clear and strong, though her hands trembled. She looked directly at Helena, a challenge in her eyes. Helena merely smiled, a triumphant, venomous smile. "Indeed, such a remarkable coincidence, then, that Mr. Thorne has been known to play a piece remarkably similar, and one does recall the unfortunate rumors regarding a certain original score that went missing from the Eastwick family collection many years ago. A score, I believe, belonging to the Viscount's late mother, a rather talented musician herself." She gestured vaguely towards Sebastian. "A piece, I might add, that Miss Thorne has been attempting to complete for some time." Chaos erupted. The whispers grew louder, morphing into gasps and outright murmurs of scandal. Madame Colette, her face ashen, turned on Genevieve. "Genevieve, what is the meaning of this?" Eastwick stepped forward, his eyes blazing with a cold, dangerous fury. "Genevieve, explain yourself. Is this true? Is this his music?" His voice was low, but carried a chilling authority that silenced the immediate vicinity. Sebastian, seeing Genevieve cornered, stepped forward, his jaw set. "The composition is mine, Viscount. Lady Genevieve merely performed it." He looked at Genevieve, a silent apology in his eyes, but also a fierce protectiveness. "It is a tribute to my mother and to yours, a piece of music that was shared between them." The room buzzed with accusations. "An illegitimate composer," someone hissed. "A stolen melody, and the Viscount's intended complicit in the deception." Genevieve felt the blood drain from her face. The carefully constructed facade had shattered. The music, meant to be a confession of love, had become an instrument of public humiliation. Lady Thistlewick, ever present, was already scribbling furiously in a tiny notebook, her eyes gleaming with the promise of a scandal that would rock the very foundations of the ton. Lady Thistlewick's special bulletin, Scandal of the Season. My dearest readers, hold on to your bonnets, for the Duchess of Cranbrook's soiree has just witnessed a spectacle that will be talked about for decades. Our very own Lady Genevieve Montgomery, the Viscount Eastwick's intended, performed a musical piece that, it turns out, was not her own. Sources, most reliable, of course, confirm the composition belongs to none other than the Viscount's illegitimate younger brother, Mr. Sebastian Thorne. Whispers of a stolen melody and a love triangle have now erupted into a full-blown scandal. Is the Viscount's intended truly a co-conspirator in this audacious deception? And what of the illegitimate composer, daring to present his art in such esteemed company. The ton is in an uproar, and this observer can only declare, the season has truly found its scandalous crescendo. The aftermath of the Duchess's soirée was a maelstrom. Genevieve and Sebastian found themselves at the eye of the storm, buffeted by public scorn and ostracization. The Montgomery townhouse, once a beacon of social aspiration, became a fortress besieged by whispers and pointed fingers. Invitations ceased to arrive, and those who dared to call did so with an air of morbid curiosity rather than genuine concern. Madame Colette was utterly devastated. Her grand comeback, her carefully orchestrated triumph, had dissolved into public humiliation. She paced the drawing-room, her voice a raw, unmusical lament. Ruined, utterly ruined. My career, my reputation, all for your foolishness, Genevieve. How could you to betray us all for a common musician, and an illegitimate one at that? Her words were daggers, each one twisting in Genevieve's already wounded heart. The gilded cage had become a prison of recrimination. Viscount Eastwick's retaliation was swift and chillingly precise. He arrived at the Montgomery townhouse the following morning, his face a mask of cold fury, devoid of any warmth or compassion. Lady Genevieve, he stated, his voice flat, your actions last night were not merely an embarrassment. They were a profound betrayal. My family's honor, my own standing, have been irrevocably tarnished by this scandal. He paused, his eyes like chips of ice. As for my brother, Mr. Thorne, his presence in my household is no longer tenable. He will be disowned, cut off entirely. And as for our engagement, it is, of course, at an end. Genevieve felt a fresh wave of despair, but beneath it, a flicker of defiance. Viscount, I did not intend. Sebastian's music is beautiful. It is art. Eastwick merely scoffed. Art? It is a vulgar display of impropriety. However, he continued, his tone shifting, the scandal must be contained, to quell the worst of the gossip, and to salvage what little remains of your reputation. I propose a swift, private marriage. No grand ceremony, no public celebration, a quiet affair, immediately. It is the only way to mitigate the damage. His words were not an offer of salvation, but a cold, calculated imposition. He was not proposing marriage out of affection, but out of a need for control, a desperate attempt to patch the gaping hole in his reputation. His eyes held no love, only a chilling authority. I cannot, Genevieve whispered, her voice barely audible. The thought of being bound to him, now, under such circumstances, was more terrifying than any public scorn. You have no choice, Lady Genevieve, Eastwick retorted, his voice hardening. You have brought this upon yourself. It was then that a quiet, yet firm voice interrupted. Perhaps, Viscount, Lady Genevieve has more choices than you perceive. Madame Dubois, Sebastian's mother, stood in the doorway, her presence a beacon of calm strength amidst the storm. She had arrived, having heard the whispers, drawn by an innate protectiveness for her son and the young woman who had found solace in her home. Sebastian stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her arm, his gaze fixed on Genevieve. Madame Colette gasped. You! What are you doing here? Madame Dubois ignored her, her gaze steady as she met Eastwick's cold stare. I believe there has been a grave misunderstanding, Viscount. Regarding the musical composition, it was not stolen. It was a gift. Eastwick scoffed. A gift? From my mother? To an illegitimate? To her? His voice was laced with contempt. Indeed, Madame Dubois replied, her voice unwavering. Your mother, Lady Eleanor, was a woman of great kindness, and a true patron of the arts. She and I shared a deep friendship, born of our mutual love for music, a friendship that transcended the rigid boundaries of society. She gifted me that composition, a piece she had started, as a gesture of that bond. It was a secret, yes, but a beautiful one. Lady Helena Blackwood, it seems, has twisted this truth for her own malicious purposes. She then produced a faded, delicate letter from her reticule. This, Viscount, is a letter from your mother, written shortly before her passing. It speaks of the composition, of her admiration for my musical talent, and of her wish for me to complete the piece. It is proof. Eastwick took the letter, his brow furrowed, his composure finally beginning to crack. He read it, his eyes scanning the familiar script of his late mother, and a flicker of something akin to genuine surprise, perhaps even shame, crossed his face. Helena's carefully constructed narrative, built on a foundation of lies and manipulation, was beginning to crumble. Genevieve looked at Sebastian, then at Madame Dubois, a surge of hope, fragile but potent, rising within her. They were not alone. They had allies. Helena twisted the narrative. Genevieve stated, her voice gaining strength, looking directly at Eastwick. She sought to ruin us both. But the music, Sebastian's music, is true. It is a testament to his talent, and to a friendship that transcended societal divides. Sebastian stepped forward, his hand finding Genevieve's, a silent, powerful gesture of solidarity. We will not be silenced, Viscount. We will not be shamed for our love of music or for the truth. A united front. In that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of their reputations, Genevieve and Sebastian found renewed courage in their shared ordeal. They realized they could not, would not, succumb to society's dictates. They would fight for their truth, for their love, and for the right to live a life governed by harmony, not by the discordant notes of scandal and ambition. The confrontation in the Montgomery drawing room, fueled by Madame Dubois's quiet revelation, had left a palpable tension in the air. Eastwick, though momentarily stunned by his mother's letter, quickly regained his composure, but the icy certainty in his eyes had been replaced by a flicker of doubt. Madame Colette, however, remained in a state of disarray, her operatic dramatics now tinged with genuine fear for her social standing. This changes nothing," Madame Colette wailed, clutching her silk shawl. "The scandal remains. Genevieve, you have ruined us." "No, Mamma," Genevieve said, her voice steady, a newfound strength emanating from her. She looked at Sebastian, whose hand still held hers, and then at Madame Dubois, who offered a reassuring nod. "The truth can never ruin, only lies." Eastwick, ever pragmatic, saw the shift in the tide. The letter, undeniable proof from his own mother, had undermined Helena's narrative. He knew the ton, fickle as they were, would eventually turn on the one caught in a blatant lie. He also saw the quiet defiance in Genevieve and Sebastian, a resolve that surprised him. "This situation," Eastwick finally conceded, his voice clipped, "requires a more public clarification." He looked at Madame Dubois. "Madame, your presence and this letter will be necessary." The stage was set for a final, pivotal gathering. Not a grand ball, but a more intimate, yet equally significant, afternoon reception at the home of the elderly, highly respected Lady Weatherby, known for her unwavering sense of propriety and her sharp intellect. It was a calculated risk, a direct challenge to Helena's machinations. As Genevieve entered Lady Weatherby's drawing room, accompanied by Madame Colette, still looking rather green, Sebastian, and Madame Dubois, a hush fell over the assembled company. Lady Helena Blackwood was already there, holding court, her eyes narrowing as she saw the united front. Eastwick stood by the fireplace, his gaze watchful, a silent arbiter. "Lady Weatherby," A woman who commanded respect with a mere glance cleared her throat. "We are delighted to have you all. There has been some unfortunate confusion, I believe, regarding recent events." Her gaze settled pointedly on Helena. Madame Dubois stepped forward, her demeanor calm and dignified. "Indeed, Lady Weatherby, and it is a confusion I believe I can clarify." She held up the faded letter. "This is a letter from the late Lady Eleanor, Viscount Eastwick's mother. It confirms that the musical composition, which was so unfortunately misrepresented at the Duchess's soirée, was a gift from her to me, a token of our deep and abiding friendship, and it was a piece she wished my son Sebastian to complete." A ripple of murmurs went through the room. Helena's face, usually so composed, flushed with anger. "A mere letter, a convenience," she scoffed, her voice rising. "A desperate attempt to salvage a scandalous affair." "Scandalous, perhaps, in your estimation, Lady Helena," Sebastian said, his voice quiet but firm, stepping forward. "But the truth, unlike your fabrications, does not require such elaborate contortions." He walked to the pianoforte, a grand instrument that dominated the room. "My mother began this piece. It is a testament to her talent, and to the genuine affection between two women who found solace in music. I have completed it as she wished." He sat at the piano, and the room fell silent. His fingers, long and elegant, touched the keys. The opening notes were familiar, the same haunting melody Genevieve had first heard echoing through the Montgomery townhouse. But as he played, the composition unfolded, rich and complex, reaching a breathtaking crescendo that spoke not only of sorrow and longing, but of triumph, of hope, and of an undeniable, powerful love. It was the complete piece, the one he had worked on for years, a symphony of his birthright and his heart. Genevieve watched him, tears welling in her eyes. The music was their story, played for all to hear. It was beautiful, undeniable, and utterly true. When the last note faded, the silence in the room was profound, broken only by a few sniffles from the more sentimental ladies. Then, slowly, a ripple of applause began, growing into a wave. Even Eastwick, who had listened with an unreadable expression, offered a single, slow clap. He then turned to Helena. "Lady Helena," he said, his voice cold and authoritative, "it appears your accusations were unfounded. My mother's honor, and indeed my brother's talent, have been unequivocally established." His gaze was a silent, chilling dismissal. Helena, defeated, her carefully constructed web of lies exposed, could only offer a weak, furious glare before retreating, her grand return utterly undone. Lady Thistlewick's final dispatch, a symphony of truth. My dearest readers, this observer has witnessed a truly remarkable turn of events. The season, which began with whispers of scandal, has concluded with a resounding triumph of truth and, dare I say, genuine affection. At a most elegant gathering, Lady Genevieve Montgomery and Mr. Sebastian Thorne, with the dignified support of Madame Dubois, bravely confronted the recent calumnies. Mr. Thorne, the illegitimate composer, played a piece of such profound beauty, it moved even the most hardened hearts, and the revelations regarding the stolen composition utterly disproven. It seems the bonds of music, and perhaps something more, are stronger than the rigid dictates of society. This observer, for one, is quite moved. Perhaps the ton has learned a valuable lesson, that true harmony lies not in rigid adherence to convention, but in the courage to embrace one's own song. In the days that followed, the ton, ever eager for a new narrative, shifted its focus. The scandal, once a roaring fire, dwindled to a smoldering ember, replaced by a grudging admiration for Sebastian's talent and Genevieve's courage. Madame Colette, though still smarting from her social setback, found herself unable to deny the undeniable talent of her daughter, or the surprising respect Eastwick now showed for Sebastian. Eastwick, true to his pragmatic nature, did not offer effusive apologies, but his actions spoke volumes. He did not disown Sebastian. Instead, he quietly arranged for Sebastian to have access to the family's extensive music library, and even subtly promoted his musical endeavors within certain circles. He had seen the sincerity of Genevieve and Sebastian's love, and perhaps, in his own cold way, respected their defiance. Genevieve and Sebastian, free from the constraints that had bound them, embraced a future together. They chose not to seek the highest echelons of society, but to build a life where music was celebrated, not suppressed. They decided to divide their time between London and a charming cottage near Madame Dubois' home in France, a place where their music could truly flourish. The story ends not with a grand wedding, but with a quiet, profound harmony. Genevieve and Sebastian, side by side, performing together. Their music, once a secret, now openly shared, spoke volumes of their journey, of forbidden love, of courage, and of the enduring power of a song that finally found its true voice. Their lives, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most beautiful melodies are found when one dares to play beyond the score. Thank you for watching A Song for Lady Genevieve. If you enjoyed this tale of Regency romance and forbidden love, please like, comment, and share. Don't forget to subscribe to StoryTunesLabX for more captivating stories.